Hey guys, what's cracking? Godsman here, coming at you with another round of clan collection reveals. Today we've got one Dimension Police unit, aka one of the cover cards, Reverse Daiyusha, you see him right here, as well as, get this, our first set of 3 in a row reveals, just like we normally expect, a 3, a 2, and a 1, and it's going to be for Regalias, but you may be surprised the ones that were picked, but more on that later. So, let's begin by looking at Daiyusha Reverse. So, we've got Dark Dimensional Robo Reverse Daiyusha. Cool fight with this, a couple of fights with this one, but I do like this one with the Leon fight. So, there's some amount of memories that come with it. By the way, shout out the Transcore, we want that too. Also cool in that fight. So anyway, what does Reverse Daiyusha do? Well, it has 2 effects. The first one is auto from the hand. Sounds like a certain someone. At the end of the battle, that your grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Dimensional Robo in its card name attack the Vanguard. If all the units that have attacked this turn have Dimensional Robo in their card names, you counterblast 1. Ride this as stand, but it gets -1 drive. Also, you cannot ride by card effects for the rest of the turn. The second skill is Act on Vance Circle once per turn. Lock 2 of your rearguards with Dimensional Robo in their card names. You choose your opponent's Vanguard and it gets -10k until end of turn. Okay, so let's digest this a little bit. The second effect, to be fair, is actually rather simple but effective. You know, just lock 2, you -10k. It's kind of like you're just throwing in Zeal into your D-Robo strategy. It makes sense, because this is what old Dark Dimensional Robo Reverse Daiyusha did, except that one counterblasted, I believe, on top of it. So this is more or less fitting of the card. It's just less cost for the same effect, so that's fine. If it was all it did, it'd be disappointing, but this hand effect is kind of the spice of it all. So at first, it's kind of like, I mean, yeah, you know, it's a multi-attack, and that's already cool because multiple Vanguard attacks in Dimension Place of all things is always very nice because it's a Vanguard-centric deck to begin with, but it does lose the drive. So, I mean, to any of you who are aware of, like, V Dimension Place, then you probably already have thought about Great Daiyusha, because Great Daiyusha has a similar effect, where you can CB1 to ride it from hand. It does give like a bunch of buffs, and like I think it like gives itself 10k, then 10k to the front row on top of that, and it gets to keep the twin drive. So that's really nice. This one doesn't get to keep the twin drive and doesn't do a lot of buffs. The thing that this one has over that though is that with Great Daiyusha, you had to wait until turn 4 because you need to have not ridden that turn. This one doesn't have that restriction. So you could, in theory, just do this right on turn 3, or, and this is kind of spicy, because of how like things are timed with each other, this cannot ride restriction is after you ride it, but Great Daiyusha doesn't have this. So, fellas, there's 3 potential Vanguards on turn 4. You go into whatever your Vanguard is, as long as it's a D-Robo, your best choices are either Dailiner or Daikaiser. We'll go into that in a little bit, though. You swing with one of those, then go into Great Daiyusha, swing with Great Daiyusha, get your twin drive, and then afterwards you CB1 again and go into Reverse Daiyusha. The entire interaction is 2 counterblasts total, but when it's all said and done, you're getting some like 3 Vanguard attacks, and that's pretty good. And you know, there's buffs to the front row, it can combo with Daikaiser, there's a lot of good days there. So this is pretty potent. It's very simple, perhaps not big and bombastic like some people were expecting, but to say it's disappointing is kind of capping it, Chief. I think Reverse Daiyusha does what it's supposed to. Now, one discussion point is, okay, so this is Dimensional Robo locked, and that is kind of annoying, especially since we just got like 0 support, and this isn't going to synergize very well with that. But so you got a lot of D-Robos. As a matter of fact, our reprints down here actually kind of tells us, yeah, we got some D-Robos. Daizaris might be a part of this. So the real question is, okay, so what's going to be your main Vanguard then, right? Because Reverse Daiyusha and Great Daiyusha, if you want to put these both in there, you're going to have to choose what your main Vanguard is going to be. Now, there's 2 ways of going about it. You have the Dailiner camp, and you have the Daikaiser camp. So let me start with the Dailiner camp. The Dailiner camp, you get crit pressure, you get big power, you get a searcher with it. That's cool, it searches, and you have defensive buffs with it. It's the more like balanced approach. It's more of like a consistency approach, you know, like just even steady. If you're running a lot of grade 3s, which I'd imagine you would, that's a really good idea. However, I actually personally I'm a little greedy, right? I like to be a greedy player. So I like going with the Daiyusha idea. So the Daiyusha idea entails more aggression because your crit is free. And on top of that, you have the potential Sentinel punish, right? The Sentinel punish, yeah, okay, it can get worked around, but it's still there. And the thing that's really great about this is with Daiyusha, on top of the crit and the Sentinel punish, you get a level of multi-attack on top of the multi-attack you're getting your Vanguards, because when you ride over Daiyusha, if you'll recall, you're able to move it to the rear guard and give a force marker to the van. That means that you're actually going to be having even more multi-attack. And because the fact that it's moving to the rear and its guard punish is on the rear as well, this thing is not just going to be a recipient of power buffs, this thing is also going to have that punish effect for your other van attacks that are going to be swinging in. So that's pretty scary. A lot of power lines and these big ass attacks with the ability to like ping you with damage if you dare Sentinel. I mean, that's pretty formidable. Now, of course, again, you're losing out on the defensive abilities and also some amount of consistency that you get with die liners, so this is more high rolly. But I mean, come on guys, the ceiling with this is kind of nuts. So really just take your pick. I'm with Daiyusha, but my boy Salt Rider was actually going with the die liner play, and then, you know, we just agreed to disagree. They're both fair plays, but we'll see what deck testing has to show. For all we know, reverse Daiyusha might not even be worth it, but I think as things stand, he's pretty good. All right, now let's move on to the next reveals. All right, we're back. So, moving on with Genesis, and as you can see right here, this certainly looks like Angelica, and yes, you'd be correct, this is in fact a Regalia, but it's not Minerva. Surprise! Oh, what? Not Minerva? Like, this got me off guard, dude. I was like, for sure they're gonna do Minerva. That was such a big, prominent unit. I mean, the Misaki fight with freaking Miwa, right? You know, Minerva is such a popular break right era of like Vanguard, but no, they decided not to do her. Instead, we've got Regalia of Love Full League. So she's a grade 3 that we're gonna get for these lovely ladies. And what does she do? So first effect, and I'm gonna actually have a potential note about this first effect. Let me read it first. So currently it says, all of your rear guards with Divine Gauge cannot be chosen by your opponent's card effects and get plus 5k. Now, I have actually heard that this might be a mistranslation, and what this protection effect actually is that your units with Divine Gauge cannot leave the rear circle. So they can be chosen by effects, but they cannot leave the rear circle. So this is kind of a debatable thing. If it is the whole leave the rear circle thing, then you're essentially immune from like field wipes and the non-choosing effects, but then things that do choose but don't remove, like a la paralyze or lock or whatnot, yeah, they're gonna still work. So honestly, you kind of pick and choose, but this might be an inferior protection effect to Angelica. But speaking of Angelica, let's continue because this is going to be quite like her. So second effect is act on van once per turn. You counterblast 1. You look at the top 5 of the decks, choose any 1 card from among them and call to rear and shuffle. But if you called a Regalia, I wonder why, you choose up to 2 of your rears and you put a Divine Gauge from Soul for each of them. That's pretty good. Third effect, auto. At the beginning of your turn, if your opponent's damage zone has 4 or less cards, you can discard 5 Divine Gauge in order to ping them a damage. So yeah, I think you guys can see where the Angelica comparison is coming in, you know? This is sort of the opposite of Angelica with the get rid of 5 Divine Gauge. Instead of healing yourself 1, you're pinging a damage, which really, they're kind of 2 sides of the same coin, but I think when you're like getting rid of 5 Divine Gauge for this, paying the damage is probably more worthwhile because Regalia is naturally a more aggressive deck. Sure, it has like natural properties that makes it resistant to control, but that's just to help keep your aggression on the field, but not so much just to be a defensive deck, especially since this is a Force clan at the end of the day. So I might actually like pinging the damage better. But the real meat of this effect is the second effect, right? Because when you're looking at the second effect, it's like, oh, well, you're actually able to get a +1 and then put 2 to Divine Gauge. Whereas Angelica was different. Angelica doesn't give you a +1, but the upside of Angelica is that you didn't have the CP1 to put 2 Divine Gauge. So again, it's a toss-up. I mean, kind of just take your pick. I think I might like Full League a little bit better, but then again, if her protection is inferior, It's debatable. I think testing is going to have to really decide. We might, any Regalias players out there, we might very well be playing both for all we know. But considering that Yggdrasil is still probably the best grade 3 Regalia, that might be a little bit tough deck ratio wise. So we'll see. But this definitely has a lot of potential. I like where they're going with this one, especially since this does give you card advantage, which I think is the #1 thing that Regalia needed. So let's move down to the other two. So we've got Regalia Prayers Lorigisa. So Lorigisa is a grade 2. And what Lorigisa does is when you place it on Vanna Rear, you counterblast 1. I go over those counterblasts, I don't know, it's a little risky. We do have a countercharger, but still. Look at top 5 cards of the deck. You choose 1 card from among them and you call to rear. Again, it's just like the grade 3. You CB1 to look at 5 and call 1. But if you call a Regalia, again, just like the grade 3, you're able to Divine Gauge 1 unit. So it's a slightly weaker version, especially since this is an act, it's only when it's placed, but you can do it on Vanna Rear, so that's cool. But still, this is a really nice effect for the grade 2. It basically does everything you want, and it continues with auto when this unit's placed on rear. You choose 2 cards from your drop with Regalia, their name, and put in the soul. Fantastic. I love the fact that they're putting in some amount of drop zone recycle. Sure, it's in the soul, but still it's drop zone recycle. And anyone who plays Regalia and Premium knows this was kind of the sub gimmick of Regalia. So this is a really nice callback to it. It gives you more fuel, which yes, can be a problem. It's the reason why we play things like Hati and whatnot. So this is sort of like a Hati, but from drop to soul, which I like a lot. And again, it gives you advantage, gives you Divine Gauge, and all that jazz. It's basically everything you would possibly want from a Regalia grade 2. So this is fantastic. Probably an automatic staple. Ordained Owl, not a Regalia by name, but definitely a classic unit for the Regalia deck back in the day. 2 effects for him. So this is a grade 1, by the way. Auto, when this unit is rode upon, you may call this card to rear circle. Pretty good, pretty good. Second effect, auto. At the end of the battle that it boosted to Regalia, you're able to put it into soul to draw a card. Okay, so these are pretty simplistic effects. Nothing too big and bombastic about it, but I do like this on the basis that in terms of grade 1s, another thing that Regalia had a problem with in addition to card advantage, I felt, was that their grade 1 rides were ass. They don't have good grade 1 rides. Sure, you could do things like Skull or Hati, but again, those are not Regalias. So this one isn't a Regalia either, but it is more in line with the Regalia strategy more directly, so this is nice to have this come out. And of course, it's the fact that it can boost a Regalia and then just move into soul and draw. I mean, it's providing you the ability to just get a soul for itself and get something defensive, so that's cool. It's basically Thread, when you think about it, it's Thread, but it doesn't transfer the markers, so it's a little bit weaker that way, but by that same token, what's stopping you from just boosting Thread with this and moving the entire column to soul and getting draw 2 for that? I mean, that's 2 to soul and then draw 2 to replace it. That's a really nice niche skill to have in the battle phase. So yeah, Ordained Owl may or may not get played in all honesty, but it's still pretty cool. But definitely this grade 3 going to get some play testing. We're going to see what this grade 3 does. The ratios are definitely debatable, but Lorigisa, this grade 2, automatic include. Definitely coming in here, almost no debate about that. This is to the level of Gleipnir, but it is a Regalia and it gets you back soul. So yeah, if they'd have one pretty debatable but cool card, so that's good. This is a staple, that's always good, and this one's more debatable. But overall, Regalia are eating pretty good. I'm so happy that they decided to go with a more card advantage kind of element with Regalia, because as I mentioned before, it's not their strong suit. You're having to pitch for things like Norn's effect. You're having to just invest things out in the field, but you're not superior calling from a lot of locations other than from Yggdrasil, which again costs a counterblast every time you do that. So if you don't have a lot of defensive capabilities, so this helps with that by being able to flood your field and keep everything else in the hand. I like that a lot. And also just sort of an X factor, because these additional effects to Divine Gauge are only applied when you're calling Regalia, they're allowing you to call things that aren't Regalia. For instance, you can be calling Ordained Owl off of the effect of the grade 2 or the grade 3, and then with Ordained Owl, you're able to just move into soul and draw and all that. So there's more combo examples. It's not xenophobic. it's definitely going to reward you for playing a lot of Regalia, but it's not xenophobic, so that was the perfect direction to go with this. I love these a lot. Alright, well, that'll do it for today. If there's anything I missed out on in terms of, like, good stuff about these cards, maybe I'm being too generous with them. Is there, like, something wrong with them? Maybe they're just redundant in the grand scheme of things. Perhaps Reverse Daiyusha is not as great as I'm giving it credit for. Or perhaps it's not even... sorry, my words today. Perhaps it's even better than I thought it was. Yeah, that could be the case too. Well, regardless, let me know down in the comments section below, and hopefully we keep on getting a steady stream of these reveals from now on. It was a little bit sporadic, you know, getting Owleaf and then a Drag Ruler, but now we're starting to go back into the traditional formula of 3 new reveals at a time, which I think everyone appreciates because we've been thirsty for this content, and so one card is cool, but yeah, please Bushy, let's just do this again. It wasn't broken, so why fix it? Alright, with that, take care. God bless.